Okay, let's get across those headlines and more. To do that, I'm joined now by media writer for The Australian, Sophie Ellsworth, and the IPA's Deputy Executive Director, Daniel Wild. Well, welcome to you both. We'll start with the big news today. Bill Shortens' impending retirement. I'll say impending because he'll stay in Cabinet until February. Then he's going to move into a new role as the Vice-Chancellor at the University of Canberra. In a way, Soph, all credit to him. He could easily have taken a plum diplomatic posting. That was one of the rumours running around Canberra. And, you know, Albanese would have wanted him out of the parliament. He certainly would have got it. But this is a real job as a university CEO. It's not one of the top ones. It's not in the group of 8. But that's not to say it isn't well paid. Whew.
Absolutely, Peter. The salary of Bill Shorten's predecessor is up there at $1.8 million a year. This is eye-watering figures. Good if you can get it. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is on about $630,000 a year. And then Peter Dutton is on about $430,000 a year as opposition leader. So this is a good gig financially for Bill Shorten. And it's any wonder, Peter, that he's grabbed it with both hands.
Yeah, let's not hear, Daniel, these universities squealing about lack of funds, if that's the sort of salaries that they dole out. I want to make a political point factually inside Labor. With the departure of Shorten, and I think there were accolades from all sides of politics today, what we are witnessing, what I think, is the last Labor leader from the Labor right departing the political stage. Now, I love to see coalition governments in power in Canberra, of course I do, but eventually they're out and Labor's in. And I want to see the best Labor government that could be fielded, the best team that could be put into Cabinet. And I always think we're better off under Labor if the right's in charge rather than the left. But I think the departure of Shorten just cements the hard left, doesn't it?
You're 100% right, Peter, and I'd say to start with that, you know, Bill Shorten has made a very big contribution to public life, and congratulations to him and what he's done. I haven't always agreed with his policy positions, but I think his heart's been in the right place, and you know, I think everybody wishes him the best in his post-parliamentary career. In terms of the, you know, political situation, I think Bill Shorten could very well be the last of the Mohicans when it comes to Labor right leadership, probably for a generation. We are seeing the Victorianisation of federal Labor, where you rightly identify that Labor right is at a low ebb. In terms of the political landscape, this is a bad thing for Australia. Labor is no longer the party of the worker. It no longer represents mainstream interests. It's become a niche, fanatical and ideological party that's been captured and governed by the very worst elements of our society. What does it represent? Well, it stands for climate fanaticism, which is driving up prices, mass migration, which is driving down wages, this poisonous identity politics that you alluded to before, with the Prime Minister not even standing in front of the Australian flag on our National Flag Day. Can you imagine Bob Hawke doing that? I can't even imagine those such as, you know, Kim Beazley or Simon Crean doing that. So it shows how far the Labor Party has fallen. And, you know, you can just imagine how bad things could get, Peter. Look at what's happened to Victoria, where you've got the most left-wing faction of the most left-wing party that's driven that state into the ground. That could happen federally in the absence of a strong Labor right faction. So I think this is a big concern for the future of Australia.
And just on that point you were making there, Dan, I think modern Labor is where the Greens were about 10 years ago. And I think the Greens have gone even further to the hard left, into the sort of the Marxist territory. And this is a terrible long-term trend for Australia.
It is, and you're quite right to say that we need both sides to be strong. I think we've got the best public policy, for example, in the Hawke-Keating era. In part, that was because there was a very good opposition as well with the coalition. Also in the Howard era, when he was in government, you had those like Kim Beazley, who I think had the nation's best interests at heart. In recent years, you know, leadership has been lacking, and we saw what happened during COVID, for example. All sides of politics at the state and federal level were in favour of very bad public policy because there was a lack of leadership. So you do need both sides to be strong. You want your best players on the field no matter what side of politics you support. And unfortunately, that's just not the case in our country, certainly on the Labor side.
We just saw the grab plate in Trudy's comments there, where John Howard was in Adelaide, weighed in again today. And this is unusual for John Howard. I think he's had 3 days of commenting on Jim Chalmers and his attacks on the Reserve Bank. Now, I made the point at the top of the show that this is all about the personal ambitions of the Treasurer. He's putting us all to the fire to protect his brand, not to slip into a recession. I mean, no one wants a recession, but we certainly don't want this high inflation either. But I'll tell you what, Bullock is showing some steel, isn't she?
She absolutely is, Peter, and she's showing that she will not be bullied by the government, as she should be. She should stand up. As we know, the RBA is separate to the government, but we know that Jim Chalmers has those Prime Minister ambitions to be Prime Minister. He's got his eye on the prize and he'll do nothing to stop it getting to become Prime Minister of this country. So him coming out and attacking the RBA, I think, is very unwise. And I think Australians are starting to say, hang on a minute, this government has been in office for a couple of years now and we're not getting any better off. We've had all these rate rises, over a dozen. They're starting to blame the government. And this is exactly what they don't want as we come up to the next federal election early next year.
Daniel, the IPA has put some research out today that digs into where the migrants live. I know there's all this talk that they get out into the regions, they benefit the economy more broadly, but you say that's not the case.
It's not the case, Peter. If you look at the data, about 83% have settled in a capital city across Australia, and that's one of the main reasons why the country and the economy is going backwards very fast. Of course, that's not to blame the migrants themselves, because of course you'd want to come to a great country like Australia for a better future, but the migration intake hasn't been planned for. It's the single biggest expansion to our population in our nation's history, and we've had 6 consecutive quarters of negative per capita growth. That is the longest decline to living standards on record, and those records go back to the early 1970s. So this economy is worse than the economy that Whitlam presided over for the living standards of mainstream Australians. We've had 9 quarters of this government. 7 of those quarters we've gone backwards in terms of per capita growth. And the reality is that the only growth mechanism that this government is interested in is never-ending population growth underpinned by mass migration. Yes, that will make your economy bigger because it's a bigger market, more people spending more money. But what matters is not the size of the economic pie, but the slice of that pie that Australians are getting. And as anyone will tell you, the slice of that pie is getting smaller and smaller.
Let's talk about energy, because energy is a big factor in household budgets, as we know. Sophie, the coalition's sort of fleshing out its nuclear policies. A bit more detail out today. 7 regional communities. These are the ones that will be flagged as locations, potential locations for reactors. There's talk that the coalition's going to sort of shower them in benefits. They'll create a government-backed managed investment fund. From that, there'll be dividends for local communities. I have to say, if it was me, I'd say to every community that wants to host a nuclear power plant, if you live anywhere close to it, your household, your business, your factory, whatever, will get free electricity, not cheap, free electricity for the life of the generator. I reckon that'd be a game changer.
Well, Peter, you're probably right, but there has to be some reward for these communities of where these are going to be located. And as we know, whenever there's something in someone's backyard, whether it be wind farms or the like, they often want something in return, and that's a financial reward. So I think it's really important that the coalition continues to reveal details of this policy, because that's been a really easy attack point for the government to say, well, we don't know much about it, we've got no detail, and they've used that as an attack point. But the more details that come out in the lead up to the election, I think, will be beneficial to the coalition so that the Australian public can make up their own minds to whether or not this is something they want to vote for.
Sophie, Daniel, thank you. Have a good weekend.